Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news which as usual has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. Hopefully you are having an amazing day. We have lots of news to get through in this video, but I want to start things out with Intel and Rocket Lake, because perhaps we have a few answers now exactly what Rocket Lake is. Well, other than the fact it's the successor to Comet Lake, of course. Rocket Lake, in terms of the architecture, has been a mystery. Videocards.com a few days ago, I did cover this news, actually leaked what appears to be information for the actual chipset and features. I mean, you can see yourself that one of the big highlights here is increased performance with new processor core architecture. Also, there are a couple of other highlights, such as new Xe graphics architecture and the inclusion of PCIe 4, not on the chipset albeit, but still for the main discrete GPU and storage devices. There's also new overclocking features and capabilities, although precious little information what those features are and what frequency the chips will operate at. We've known that Rocket Lake will be 14nm for quite some time, but the actual architecture which is inside of it, well, that hasn't been so clear. I think at this point it's a pretty safe bet that it's not straight up Skylake. At least something for the chip has changed, not least of which because popular rumours seem to push the fact that this chip is not 10 processor cores. If we look at a new rumour that's emerged from ptt.cc, it's a bulletin board from user SharkBay, and they actually have usually pretty good information. They typically leak for Intel, AMD, so on and so on. And here, I'm going to focus, by the way, on the desktop. There is some information for mobile, which you can read yourself, but I'm focused on the desktop here. For LGA 1200, we have a 35 to 125 watt part, which operates with 8 processor cores. Furthermore, directly below that, you can see the first and second level cache, 48/32 KB and 0.5 megabytes, which is actually smaller than what you may assume. I know I said I'm going to ignore the mobile side of the equation, but if you compare that to Tiger Lake, which is above it, it would imply that the cache is smaller. And one of the things we know for Willow Cove is the cache was bumped up. Basically, they kind of tweaked the cache. So it almost looks like they've shrunk the amount of cache on the chip, but we'll get into that in just a second. Also, I mentioned it's 125 watts, but directly below that, under SVID for Rocket Lake CPU only, it's operating between 140 to 245A, which would imply that this chip can be kind of hungry for energies. Also, the fact that it's only 8 processor cores is interesting. Assuming that number is accurate, it would be regressing from the 10 processor cores of Comet Lake. Now, I will say that if this is a new architecture, and assuming we see a decent IPC bump at a decent clock frequency, I think even in 2021, when we assume these processors will launch, 8 processor cores for gaming with 16 threads is probably going to be fine. I tackled this recently in a video, actually just yesterday, where I was discussing how consoles will impact PC gaming. And one of the things that I still assert is that if you have an 8700K and you've overclocked it, or you have something like a 2700X, or anything along that type of processor performance, you're probably going to be pretty good for the moment. Arguably, 3-4 years time, okay, you may want to get a higher core count processor, there we go. But I think more likely, things that will be pushed will probably be like larger amounts of RAM, faster GPUs of course, plus potentially storage devices. So I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to need an SSD for some type of caching system. But anyway, getting back to the story here, what we've learned from the video card slide is that a new architecture is in place. Now, assuming all of this information is true, which it's the internet, it may not be, it does kind of tally up with a bit of confusion I'm hearing. One source emailed me last year, it was via anonymous email account, and they basically stated that, a burner email to be clear, that it was actually Sunny Cove. But then someone else contacted me and told me that no, it's actually Willow Cove. which obviously would imply that it was Tiger Lake. So potentially we're looking at a hybrid between these two, obviously for the desktop. And I frankly don't even care about the performance of the chip at this point. I'm just really curious to see what Intel have been tinkering with. Naturally, Intel will be running up against Zen 3 probably by the time these chips launch, and who knows, maybe Zen 4 won't be that far into the distance. Zen 3, assuming nothing bad happens, what with the current world events, is scheduled to launch by the end of this year, and of course will be the send-off for the AM4 platform. AM5 will launch next year, once again assuming there's no delays, and I'm hearing it's going to be DDR5. I've covered Zen 3 as well as Zen 4 extensively in the past with a couple of exclusives, but as a quick reminder, I don't believe there's going to be an increased core count for Zen 3. I think it's pretty much the same thing, higher IPC, albeit with obviously a drastically improved IPC. Next architecture though, Zen 4 could increase the core count, but it's really going to depend on whether AMD feel it's worth it. I did mention that we would be bringing back discussions to Comet Lake, and allegedly Intel will be announcing the 10th generation processors, aka Comet Lake, on the 30th of April. So this information comes to us via El Chipatas Informatico. Hopefully I'm not butchering that pronunciation too much. And this means that it probably will be some point in May that reviews start to get posted. And just a quick reminder, the next generation processors from Intel do have drastically changed specifications compared to what we have now. Ultimately, the biggest change here is the fact that hyperthreading is part of pretty much every SKU. And clock frequencies have also been boosted as well. So we're looking at up to 10 cores, 20 threads, with the lower end parts, such as the 10100, being 4 cores, 8 threads. In my honest opinion, the thing that I'm most disappointed with is actually the fact that there's not a K derivative of one of the 4-core CPUs. I would absolutely love one of the 4 core processors to be unlocked. The only thing that could be a problem with Comet Lake is it looks like it's going to be pretty damn power hungry. Then again, I do suspect, simply because of clock frequency and the fact that, of course, games don't necessarily go across a whole bunch of processor cores, for those pushing higher refresh rate screens, the 10th generation is probably going to be the fastest for games, although, of course, we don't really know how the next generation of Zen processors is going to fare in terms of clock frequency. I did hear that the clock frequency for Zen 3 is not that much higher, maybe 100, 200 megahertz, but of course the IPC gains could make up for that, so yeah. Anyway, next news story, and this is Nvidia, and the website tweaktown.com have put out an article which is pushing the fact that RTX 3080 and other cards in the 30 series lineup will be announced in August, and then of course we will see a later release date. Potentially, let's say, September. This information is allegedly based on their own information, their own sources, plus also a Bloomberg article which has been written by Tai Kim. And the post from Tai Kim is actually titled, "Nvidia's biggest pleasant surprise may be yet to come," and states that despite the cough that's going around, Nvidia are actually doing really well. Because, well, basically the data center business is just doing absolutely insane right now, especially with a lot of people working from home, and let's just say world events, put it mildly, have not really impacted Nvidia. But getting back to the announcement and release date, the cards, according to this article, will be announced in August, and then we will see the cards launch in September. I have to say that this is a little bit earlier than what I'm anticipating. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if in August we see some type of announcement for Nvidia's next generation architecture, but I don't know if that will be gaming focused. So in other words, They may show it for the data center side of the equation. Maybe they'll give a preview of things for gaming, but I wouldn't afford it to be quite that early, because a lot of reports right now floating around the internet that Nvidia are basically waiting for Big Navi. So I don't know if they would want to kind of push things out that early. Big Navi looks like it's going to launch in Q4 based upon what Lisa Su said. And the really weird thing is, originally I was hearing that those cards were going to launch in mid of this year, but then of course were pushed back. Now of course my information could have been wrong, or maybe AMD just felt that they wanted a little bit more time to cook the cards in the oven, a little bit more time to optimize and get the clock speeds up, or whatever else they were doing. So I think that when the next generation of cards launch, it's going to be very interesting for the PC space, especially given the next generation of consoles. After all, it's not just about the performance of the cards, but it's going to be the entire ecosystem. Things such as being able to get the most out of the hardware, efficiency in other words, with technology like DLSS is going to be extremely important for the mid-range. You can't just keep cranking up the number of CUDA cores and clock frequency, and that's all there is to it. There has to be efficiency, which is another reason that technology like variable rate shading is going to be so important for the future of the graphics cards on the PC. So I do feel that the next generation of cards is going to be very impressive. Personally, I think Nvidia are going to double down on ray tracing performance, as well as of course continue to evolve DLSS, and I also believe that AMD will probably do much the same. I personally believe that there's a very good chance AMD will have a DLSS-like technology. I don't know if it will function exactly the same, but I think honestly at this point it's probably logical. I'm actually testing at the moment DLSS 2.0 with Control. I've done about half the testing, and I have to say it's a pretty big upgrade, and also of course tested Wolfenstein before that. And I have to say that Nvidia's technology still isn't perfect. I still see the odd graphical glitch here or there, but geez, compared to the debuted version of DLSS, it's a huge upgrade. And the final story for today, because it's last alphabetically, Sony allegedly want to make playing games on the PlayStation 5 as, quote, easy as Netflix. This is according to Jason Schreier. I'm going to read out the quote verbatim. I've heard some fascinating things about the PS5's operating system like this. One that pitches they've been making to developers is playing a PS5 game should be easy as Netflix. And then that they want players to feel that they can just load a game up immediately and know how much time a particular activity is going to take them. They want people to feel more inclined to play in short bursts rather than only wanting to turn on the console when they have few hours to spare, end quote. So that kind of sounds like Sony want to push towards engagement, because this is my personal feelings on this, and I'd be very curious to see what you feel about it. But there are a lot of games I kind of want to play, but I know that in some instances I'm going to be kind of like stuck on them for a while. So for example, it's really like if you've got 30 minutes to play, there are some games in your mind you just kind of like, no, not touching those. Not only because you know that you're going to get kind of lost in the game worlds, but because you kind of don't really know how long a particular activity is going to take. So you could be stuck on it for like 2 hours, let alone 30 minutes. So I think what essentially is saying here is that you should have a rough idea of how long a particular mission or how long a particular part of a story is going to take you. I guess it depends on how this is implemented, because it may also kind of break the immersion factor, but it seems to be also what Sony and Microsoft are pushing for in terms of being able to jump in and out of games, keeping the immersion factor as high as possible, keeping your time on the system and the ecosystem as high as possible. It also makes me speculate that Sony could potentially go with the Game Pass model in the future as well. Obviously they do have PlayStation Now, and they do give away games every month, but I think one of the strengths of Microsoft, honestly, is the Game Pass. I actually love Game Pass. I've got Game Pass Ultimate at the moment for my PC and my Xbox, although I barely play either of my consoles at the moment. I'll get into why in just a second. But on the PC, I use Game Pass all the time. Like, I've got Gears 5. I was even offered a review copy by Microsoft. As I got a review copy of Gears 4, so they just automatically sent it to me. And I just haven't even used the code because Game Pass is so cool. And I think Sony could benefit a lot with it. I've said before that I believe one of the things Microsoft will do going into this generation, when you buy the new Xbox, they will give you 3 to 6 months of Game Pass for free. Just to kind of push the fact that, hey, you may have spent several $100s with us, but at least you get all of these free games accessible for the next several months. So I do feel that Sony, in that regard, are behind Microsoft, and I really do love the Game Pass system. As for why I'm playing my consoles less, and this does circle back to the whole thing of being easy as Netflix, the thing I love about my PC is that I'm always using it. So it makes things super quick for me just to load a game, and the load times at the moment for console, especially, particularly if there needs to be a patch applied, are just painful. Like, if a system update needs to be applied to either the Xbox or PlayStation, and I've got very fast internet, it's just so painful for the update to need to be applied, and then you need to download the game update. And if you've got like 30 minutes to play, it pretty much kills all of your time. And of course, if you're using something like Game Pass, you do need the console to be online anyway. I'm not saying that it's completely and utterly like painful like playing on a console, but I don't think it's as smooth as what I'd hoped for going into this generation. Because if you remember, Sony, for example, were touting being able to kind of download segments of the game and then you kind of play that as it was happening, and that never really materialized. So I think being able to kind of jump in and out of experiences is definitely kind of the way forward for me on games on the console. And I'm going to be very interested to see how this naturally progresses for the PC ecosystem. But anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you did, then the normal stuff, like, share, comment and subscribe. And I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.